Okay, you're probably familiar with slope-intercept form, and it is a vocab word, but this is like one of the most important lessons. It's a foundation of a lot of math, so definitely make sure that you feel comfortable with this and that you can move around with it really easily. So we have our slope-intercept form, and if you remember, it is y equals mx plus b. And I'm just going to use different colors so that we really differentiate the parts of this problem. Right? Okay, so let's start with slope. Right? It's represented by m. It's also called the rate of change, a vocab term. We can think of rise over run. We can also think of change in y over change in x, right? Delta y over delta x. This is from the previous lesson, right? We had B05 point, let me check. It was just the right lesson, right? B05.3. So if you don't remember slope, definitely take a look at that lesson. And then we have our y-intercept. Right? And this is why it's called slope-intercept form. Right? The name, the vocab word is a little hint of what's involved in the form. So our y-intercept, it's represented by B. It's our starting point, or initial value. It's the point where the line crosses the y-axis, and our x-coordinate is always 0. Right? So we have 0, comma y. This is very important. Our y-intercept is always 0, comma y. Okay, so let's just do some examples, jump right into it. Graph the following lines. So we have our m equals 2 and our y equals -4. So, you know, just to get used to finding our slope and everything, let's do both of these at once. M equals -5/4, right? It's the number in front of the x. And then our b equals -4, b equals 4. All right, this one is -4, so it's -4. This is +4, so it's a +4. Okay, so here are the steps that you want to do for graphing. So we have 1, find m and b. Remember, m is in front of the x. Right, so if I had an equation, right, y equals 3 plus 2x, it's not this number, right? Even though we're used to it being the first number that we see, it's the number that's in front of the x. Okay, 2, graph y-intercept. 3, determine direction of line, slope, right? And our options are positive, negative, 0, and undefined. And then 4 is use slope, rise over run to graph. And then here's a little one that I think is really important. 5, we'll just do like a little side step, like add arrows on line. So when you add an arrow on a line, it's telling you that it keeps going, right? See how this has an arrow? It means the line keeps going, even though we decided to only look at, you know, this -5 to 5 grid. All right, so thinking about those steps, let's start. So we had our n and b. We already did step 1. We're going to graph our y-intercept. So we're going to start here at -4, right? This is our y-axis, so this is our y-intercept. Let's do both of these at the same time so that we can really get used to the steps, right? So here our b is 4, right? b is -4, b is 4. Now we want to determine the direction of the slope. So we see that m is 2, it's a positive number. So I'm going to just put right here like positive slope. I'm just going to sketch a little positive line. And then here, m is negative, so we have negative slope. And I should know that this is what it should look like. Now, it's not going to be exactly like that, but just to make sure that you're on the right track, because sometimes people will mess up. Okay, so now we use the slope to graph. So we have rise over run. So rise over 1 is really like 2 over 1, right? We know that m equals 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. And then we just connect that line to the best of our ability. And we add those arrows. And that's it. We graphed it. So this one, we have a slope of negative 5, 4. So we have rise over run is negative 4, 4. So we're actually going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to connect this line. Add those arrows. And we could tell we didn't make a mistake because we matched it with this, right? Sometimes with negative slope, people get confused. They do the 5 over 4, right? They do like rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they go run this way, right? And then they draw the line like this. And this slope, you know, it's a similar proportion, but it's completely wrong because this is a positive slope and this is a negative slope. So that's why I like to do step number 3 is to remind yourself like what the line should look like, right? It should look like it's going down with a negative slope. So just to be really careful that you know which direction that line will look like. Okay, let's do a special case right here, right? So this one is weird. We're gonna say it's a special case. Right? So we have x equals 4. So if we were to look at this, right, this is what this graph looks like. Every time you go, x is always going to be 4. So it doesn't matter what y is, x is always going to be 4, right? So I could have 4, 0, 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, and so on and so forth, right? And I'm just plotting those points. So with this one, we have our m is undefined, and our b doesn't exist, right? This line never runs into our y-axis. So whenever you see x equals something, you should know that it's a vertical line. And if you can't remember, just pick some points for yourself to graph. You know, make an x-y table. And be like, okay, I want x to be 4 and y could be anything. So I know that this is the line. So it's really tricky, but you got to get used to it. And once you do, it's not so bad. All right, let's take a look at some few more examples. So we have y equals negative 1/4 x plus 3. Y equals 1/4 x. And y equals 3 minus x. All right, let's start with our m. So we have m equals negative 1/4, right? It's the number in front of the x. M equals 1/4. And this one's a little tricky because this one they switched it, right? So the x is actually after the constant. And then there's no number, but remember, when you don't see a number, we know that there's a 1 there. So this one is a negative 1 because it's minus x. So that one's a little tricky. And then let's do our b. Our b is 3. This one's a little tricky too, right? Our b is actually 0, right? This is the same thing. Y equals 1/4 x plus 0. But why would we write that 0, right? So we're just going to write it as y equals 1/4 x. But we need to know, you know, as math students, that means our y-intercept, our b, is 0. And then here, again, we just want to be careful. Our b is 3. And it's in a different order than we're used to, right? We're used to seeing the x term first and then the constant, but they switched it up to try and trick us. All right, so we found the m and the b. We're going to graph the y-intercept. So we have positive 3, 0, positive 3. And then we're going to sketch our direction. All right, so our slope is negative, so it should look like that. Our slope is positive, so it should look like that. Our slope is negative, so it should look like that. And now we can finally graph. Right, so our rise over run is 1/4. So rising, but it's negative, right? So going down 1, going over 4. And this is what our line looks like. add those arrows, right? And it matches, right? It's not exactly the same steepness, but it's the same like direction, right? This is clearly a negative slope, so we want to make sure that matches. Here, right, we have rise over run is 4, 1 over 4, so rise 1, run 4. And sometimes, like for this one, if you look at, I'm going backwards 4 and down 1, so that's sort of opposite. But you don't even need to do this point, right? You could just connect these 2 points and then just like draw it out. You just want to get used to like knowing like what the line should look like and having the ratio of the slope correctly. Okay, this one, our slope is -1. So whenever it's -1, it's going to go like exactly in those corners if you have like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is like nice and easy, right? Right? Or you could do rise 1, but it's negative, and then over 1, right? And it matches. So there's graphing. Once you practice a lot, it's not so bad. And then we're going to go to a very similar skill, but not quite the same. So this one, they gave us the graph, and we're trying to find the equation, right? And the other side, they gave us the equation, and we're trying to find the graph, right? So this one's a little trickier, but it's very similar. So let's go over our steps here. 1, we're going to find B. 2, we're going to find M. 3, we're going to put in slope intercept form, right? So this seems pretty obvious, right? Just find B, find M, put it in the form, but just to help keep things clear for people that like steps. And then 4, this is like a separate one. Be careful of special cases, right? So that is when M equals 0, M is undefined, right? So when M is 0, it looks like that. When M is undefined, it looks like that. All right, so let's do this. Let's start. So we said find B. So B equals -1. Let's just do it all at the same time, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. B equals 5. And then B doesn't exist. And then they want us to find M. So first of all, we know that M is negative. So we can put the negative there. And then we have our rise over run. So if we look here, it's sort of hard to see, but it looks like these are intersecting right here. So it looks like it's going down 1 and over 3. So we have our M is -1/3. Right here, our M is 0, right? This is a tricky one. And then here, our M is undefined. All right, and now we can just write our equation. So we have y equals mx plus b, right? Y equals mx plus b. But this one, 0 times anything is 0, so we're actually just going to write y equals 5. And this one is tricky, right? This is like the problem on the back side, where we had a vertical line right here. So this one is actually going to be x equals -4. Okay, so I'm going to give you some hints for vertical and horizontal lines. So we have these 2 acronyms. We have HOY, and then we have VUX, Hoy and Vux. So some people this might not help them at all. Some people, they like little tricks like this. So, you know, if you don't like it, don't use it. If you do like it, do use it. So this stands for horizontal, 0 slope, y equals. Let's just make that y equals. And this is vertical, undefined, slope, and x equals. Okay, so if you can't remember if it's right, you might get confused. It's like Hoy and Vux. So just to use this in context, right? So here we had a horizontal line, we had a 0 slope, and we had y equals x. And then here we had a vertical line, we had an undefined slope, and we had x equals. So hoy and bucks, hoy and bucks, hoy and bucks, hoy and bucks. Again, might not help you at all, you might like it a lot. What I like to do when I'm stuck is create an XY table, right? So if I'm looking at this graph right here, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to create an XY table for myself. I'm just going to pick this point, so that is 0, 5. I'm going to put this point over here, right? That's 2, 5, 4, 5, negative 1, 5. And I just look at this equation, right? And I'm like, okay, no matter what, y is equaling 5. So y equals 5. So there's a few different ways to do it. You just got to make sure you know that a horizontal line is y equals, right? Because it's saying like our y level is 5, right? Like think of like y is up and down, right? So it's saying like this line is telling us that no matter what, our y, our vertical level is at 5. So you definitely want to get used to really get good at those vertical and horizontal lines. All right, one last section and then we're done. What if the equation is not in slope-intercept form? Okay, so this is actually, right, let's put two examples so we get what we're saying, right? So we have 2y equals 6x minus 8, and then over here we have y equals negative 3 plus 4 over 3x. So one trick that we can use, especially for this one, is lesson B04.4, which is solve for y. So that's why we had that lesson, is for stuff like this, when the equation is not in slope-intercept form. So what we're going to do right here is we're going to solve for y, right? And when I mean solve for a variable, it doesn't mean I need a number. It means I need to have y on one side and everything else on the other side. So I saw in some of your problems that some people were actually giving numbers for y, but that's not what we want. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to divide both sides by 2. So we have y equals 3x minus 4. And remember, when you're dividing, you have to do it across the whole thing, not just the first thing, right? So now we have y equals 3x plus 4. We can graph that, right? Let's do our steps. So we have m equals 3. We have b equals negative 4. We're going to graph our negative 4. We know that our slope is positive, so it's going to go up like that. And then our slope is 3. Our rise over run is 3, right? 3 rise, 1 run. So over 3, up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1, right? And we just connect those dots, and we have our beautiful line with our arrows. All right, and then over here, we actually did a problem like this before. We don't need to put it in slope-intercept form because we already know that our slope is the number in front of the x. But sometimes people like to just like put things in the way that they're familiar with, right? Sort of like how you sort of like to keep your room a certain way, or keep your backpack a certain way, right? So I like to keep my equations a certain way. So I like to have the x term first. And now for me, that's just easier to see my m and my b, right? M equals 4 over 3. B equals negative 3, and now I can graph negative 3. We know we have a positive slope, so it should look like that. We have rise 4, run 3, rise 4, run 3. We're going to connect those dots, add those arrows, and we have our beautiful line. So this is a very important lesson. Definitely practice the problems, do the application problems, because slope-intercept is one of the easiest ways to graph a line, and you're going to want to have that, skill in your toolbox.